It's a new year, and in 2025, I'd like to draw your attention to some cool new and classic designs over on my shop. It helps the channel very much, and with a wide variety of designs, I'm pretty sure you'll find something that you will like. Link to find them is in the description, and a very heart. And we are live. I'd like to say thank you, everybody, for being here on this Monday evening in North America, Sunday morning in the Asia Pacific, and in the middle of the night if you're watching from Europe. Again, we are with our good friend George from G3, and we're going to be having an excellent show. I think we did one of our best shows ever yesterday, George. I quite enjoyed it, and I think reading some of the feedback, the audience enjoyed it as well. We have a couple of comments I want to address before we start. But before we do that, again, we might be having some new people watching the show for the first time. Would you, for example, I would, sorry, for anyone who's watching it for the first time, I'm Felix. I'm the host of the show, my channel. I'm a little bit, again, everybody, I'm waking up where I am right now. So, you'll have to bear with me if I do sound a bit discombobulated. I'm still wiping the sleep out of my eyes. Where our friend George, he's coming to us from the United States, so I think he's raring and ready to go. But George, for those of the audience that haven't been to any of our previous live streams, could you care to tell them about yourself and what you do and what you think?
I don't like to say too much about it, but I've been a private military contractor working in Iraq and Afghanistan for the last, since early 2010. And I worked in a bunch of different places, done a bunch of different things. While I was over there, I've been working on how to overcome a lot of, very technical academic problems in the social sciences. So I've been working on the unified behavioral theory of how to integrate evolutionary theory with Freudian psychological theories. I originally started that program by noticing that you could take Aristotle's 6 forms of government. It covers the full range of human behavior in the social sciences. All the social scientific theories can fit somewhere in that framework. It absorbs all the other government form theories, link it to economic growth. Well, if you use the per capita GNP function as economic rates of change over population growth rates of change, then you can link that to first and second more developed first and second more developed countries, and third and fourth world failed states, less developed countries. So then you can get the whole social sciences in a series of analytical frameworks that encompass the whole range of human behavior, and then start doing predictive analysis on that. So I was working on that while I'm doing a whole bunch of other jobs overseas. So you combine that with how to do PMC and dime projection analysis into those geopolitical models. And the synergy is really good. So the different types of geopolitical models and trends that we've been talking about since at least, I was on your Discord chat for years, but I didn't start to come out until after I left Afghanistan in 2021. So now we come to find out, I knew this was going to happen. That's why it was so important to get those slide sets up on the geopolitics, on your website, on Working Brothers website, on Monster Consortium with my good friend Tim Kalin, who's used to be a SIGINT analyst for the Culinary Institute of America. So the getting this information out there, because it's really apparent the generals are not very well trained in geopolitics, not at the grand strategic level. They're not trained at the grand strategic level at all. It was really super obvious that Trump was completely misinformed before he took office. Yeah, just watching Sebastian Gorka every night since the election. Oh yeah, Trump is going to deal with Putin from a position of strength. then he gets picked to be the deputy NSC, and then national security advisor, and General Kellogg pushing that whole his Kellogg plan, and they're going to have a ceasefire, and just ever since he wrote that in his April document of April of last year. So he's been saying this for a whole entire year, and I thought he would really back off on that after the election. Oh no, they doubled down. Like, oh, okay. They don't understand that the European economies are about to collapse without Russian natural gas, and all Putin has to do is nothing. So that was when, because I've been writing about that on Energy Newsbeat the entire month of January. And yeah, the people in the closed groups know I've been talking about that as early as at least before January 8th. I'm trying to look at that different. Well, the problem with the signal groups I'm in, they have the disappearing, it deletes. So I have to look back at some of the channels that haven't deleted.
Auto destruction.
The auto destruction. So yeah, I know I've been ever since I knew the Ukrainian pipeline contracts ended in Ukraine on the 31st. So I'm like, okay. Yeah, I mean, you could see that coming. Obviously, it definitely ends on the 31st, and the Ukrainians aren't going to renew it. So that energy prices are going to spike. This stuff is really super obvious. We know that from the Syrian conflict that instead of natural gas going from Russia to Western Europe and from Baku to Western Europe through Turkey, now it's cutting down to one supplier and fewer pipelines. Prices go up, not down. Why is that important? Because natural gas by pipeline is way cheaper than LNG.
Before we begin on this, I mean, you're kind of summarizing, I think, a lot of the information that we brought up yesterday. There's one comment that was left in the previous video that we made yesterday that I wanted to address because I said I would, because he was very much there's two. I'll get to the other one, but the first one is this is from I Love Double D. It's a good name, at I Love Double D. And what he said was, what I've seen is Putin has lost completely. Russia has been removed as a viable player in energy exports. Russia has lost the fear factor of its military and lost billions in sales to boot. His country has lost over 300,000 dead and 500,000 wounded. He didn't and isn't getting the entirety of Ukraine, but will likely keep the Crimea and some of east of Ukraine. So far, it's a long comment. So just if you need to get your pen up. Which really gives this part, I don't think I could actually answer all of this myself, but I'd like you to do so. Which really just gives him access to a large lake that can easily be contained at the Bosphorus Straits. And Russia's demographic decline isn't working in Russia's benefit. Russia has proven it can't win a decisive conflict, even on its own border. Unless Trump lets Putin off the hook, Russia will collapse within 18 months. The color chart presented, that was the one we had yesterday, if you remember the stoplight one. The color chart presented is quite frankly a joke. It provides no information of value. And the subject of the Middle East isn't connected to the Ukraine. The Middle East has always been a mess and always will. It's tribal and controlled by a 7th century cult ideology. I also am a defense contractor and a military vet of 20 years. I don't claim to have some sort of information that can only be released in a day or so. Just looking at what is happening. That Turkey controls Europe with Russian natural gas is a joke. There are other sources, including the U.S. In 2024, the United States shipped 51 billion cubic meters of liquefied natural gas, LNG, to the European Union at 22% decrease from 2023. The U.S. is the world's largest LNG exporter and has been a key supplier to Europe since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's a lot to digest, but do you have any kind of response to that?
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, he's his facts are right, okay, but he doesn't see the other facts. So yes, there's a lot of stuff going on, and yeah, I wish I could read that because we need to go point by point because
Here,
yeah,
I'll put it in the chat.
yeah.
I'll put it in the
See,
chat,
I mean,
in the private chat. So
totally right about their facts, but not in the right context.
right.
Okay, yeah, because
Okay.
that's the problem here.
Okay, hold on a sec. I'll do it point by point because this has a character limit. So hold on a sec.
Yeah, I wish I could read it.
Hold on. Can you open up Telegram while we're doing this as well?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send it to you via Telegram. This is the whole message. Yeah, because there's several points in there. There's the Bosphorus, how America can supply Europe, a number of other things. I sent you that by Telegram.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I keep on
All
going
right.
over.
Well, I've sent it to you via Telegram. I can
Right.
go through it again if you'd like, but I mean,
No, I got it. Let's just go. Let's just go sentence by sentence because this is a really good comment, just to bring up and go through because a lot of people are going to be shocked at at the coming reality over the next, every quarter. They've been told one thing, and there's another side of the coin that they haven't been told. If you understand the sea power versus land power dichotomies, yes, everything around Eurasia is planned. Every proxy war and the funding of different Sunni VEOs, sometimes they're called freedom fighters, sometimes they're called terrorist organizations, but it's the same people. Yes, the Brits have been funding the Sunni VEOs since Lawrence of Arabia. It is not new. Operation Cyclone with Zbigniew Brzezinski, even Erdogan himself said after one of the terrorist attacks in Turkey, when was that? About a year ago. He says you can call these you can call these different terrorist groups whatever three-letter names you want, but he still knows that they're funded by the Western powers when it's convenient. And then if they attack in the wrong direction, then they get pushed back or obliterated. All right, and it's a long, complicated discussion when that happens, but the overarching idea here is there's conflict in every single area of Eurasia. It is not by accident. It is Speakman's Rimland containing the Heartland strategy. So yes, and there's even, okay, I talked to a lot of military people of the different tier 1, tier 2 groups. Yeah, when I go over this in detail, yeah, we can connect a lot of dots. And then all of a sudden, everything starts to click. Okay, I can go over my slide sets. They have to speak very generally because they all have NDAs and stuff like that. So yeah, that's fine. I throw my information out there. I do not. They can talk amongst themselves. Let me put it that way and see whether I'm right or not. And well, okay. See how close I am. So yeah, just to put that out there. LNG is so much more expensive than Russian natural gas. That no, if LNG was an adequate substitute, the German economy would not be collapsing. Stuart Turley and I on Energy Newsbeat talk about that all the time. All right, if you're taking raw materials or agricultural products out of the ground and you're processing them into consumer products, phases, and then you're distributing them to consumers. Well, energy is used, machines are used in each one of those phases, and there's a whole bunch of them. I mean, even just to make, a pen or a pencil, like Milton Friedman's analogy, even that's more complex than people think. So making a car is super complex. Well, if you start adding, 5-10% increases in energy at every single phase, and you multiply that out, yeah, it's not difficult to understand why BASF is having trouble, Siemens, and especially Volkswagen.
How would you address his comment that Russia has been removed a viable player from the energy exports?
Well, the Duran guys talk about that all the time, but they're not the only. They're far from the only ones. The whole thing about in the Kellogg strategy about putting more sanctions on Russia. Well, it's not sanctions on Russia per se. It's on the resellers of Russian oil and gas, particularly India, or China, or Turkey. TurkStream is still operational. They increased the pressure on that to increase the volume, but you can only increase the pressure and volume so much. The oil and gas is coming down through the Dagestan pipeline into Turkey, from Baku to Tbilisi to Ceyhan. So that's still operational, but only so much can go through that pipeline. They haven't put sanctions on Turkish exports because it has Russian oil and gas in it. They haven't done that yet. Mm-hmm. So the bottom line is, and it's from a whole bunch of different sources, because Stuart Turley that I'm on air with, his people study that full time, obviously, that aspect of it. And it's Europeans are just paying way more for all their energy now, because now they're having to pay the middlemen. So if they come in with the next round of sanctions, well, then what does that do? Well, then that just leaves the energy in Eastern Europe, and their energy prices go down. So then China just its products become even more globally competitive. Same with India, because then the European businesses have to move to where the energy is. So that only accelerates the decline of Europe or the West, if you're going to use.
As we were saying yesterday, products like the automotive industry in Germany and Fiat, Renault, and others in places like Italy and France.
Right.
Let's go through another one of his. He also says that he didn't and isn't getting the entirety of Ukraine, but will likely keep the Crimea and some of eastern Ukraine or east of Ukraine. Was Putin ever after the entirety of Ukraine? This is something I hear all the time, that he's being held, where he is, and if he's not held there, his armies of darkness will move across Ukraine, and then it will, end. His armies will end in Paris. So what is your answer to that?
Yeah, let me see if I got a map on that, because people need to look at like the 2010 election maps or the 2014 election maps. I might have one. I might have them here. This is a long slide set. Wait, hold on a second. Oh yeah, go to slide 36.
36. Okay.
Yeah.
One sec. All right, here we go.
All right. That's roughly where up in the northwest part of Ukraine, that's the Catholic speaking Catholic Ukrainian speaking area. The part to the southeast is roughly the Russian speaking Orthodox Christian area. Mm-hmm. I never thought that Putin was ever going to leave those areas, because it's been in Army Times and Stars and Stripes that if Russia invades, they're going to go to this big guerrilla campaign, and they've been training, all the Eastern European armies and how to fight guerrilla warfare from behind the scenes, and That's just been going on forever. And I even wrote it. Well, somebody wanted me to comment on a certain generals that there's a 4-star retired, was making that argument back in March of 2022. I didn't realize it was his page. I thought it was a repost. And I said the same thing.
I think you need to make it clear, because I don't think the audience, and from what you just said, made it clear. This map basically gives you an idea of the separation of Ukraine between Catholic and Orthodox, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so the blue meaning Orthodox, the yellow meaning Catholic. So this is the separation of linguistic, ethno, and religious populations within the country of Ukraine. So I think this is what George is getting at. If I can just summarize, George, it maybe stop me if I'm wrong. What George you're saying is that he was never going to try and move into the Catholic regions because he didn't want to have an endless guerrilla war.
Correct.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. All right. So let's move on to the next point that this guy had to say.
Let me finish this one.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, this is very, very important, because we've been saying this. We've been using it, some kind of similar map since March of 2022 when this thing kicked off. Yeah, he's totally gonna stay out of the Catholic speaking areas, but at first he's just wants to protect his seaport and the Black Sea Fleet in Crimea and Rostov-on-Don. So the line of contact is, I don't have a line of contact map up here, but it's basically all the way up to it's along the Dnieper, and then over towards where they're wherever they're fighting in Lysychansk and Donetsk and places like that. So they're only about halfway through that, but then the Ukrainians stepped up the attacks coming from the Odessa Oblast on their shipping. So now what does that mean? Putin is probably going to want to take all of Odessa Oblast, along the seacoast.
Okay. Right. What about the next point?
Okay.
Because I want to just get through this quickly, because I said I would in the comment section on the previous.
Oh, this is a whole show in itself.
Yeah. Well, let's try to rifle through this so we can get to where we want to be. Basically, he's going to take Crimea, as obviously he did in 2014. But what he says is, which really just gives him access to a large lake, that meaning the Black Sea, I'm assuming, that can easily be contained at the Bosphorus Straits.
Correct.
And the Bosphorus Straits, for those of you watching, I'm sure 99% of you know, but it's the narrow strait that separates Europe from Asia, and the city of Istanbul is built on both sides. And you could also further that after the Marmara Sea, after the Bosphorus, you've got the Dardanelles Straits as well. But let's just go with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So
he's just got access to a large lake, and he can be contained at the Bosphorus.
Well, yeah. Okay. Now you start to get into the land power integration aspect. Yeah, they've seen this coming for a long time. The land power strategies are basically Karl Ratzel, Friedrich Haushofer, and Alexander Dugin. Yeah, if people start watching videos on, what I call sea power versus land power, a lot of YouTubers call it the Atlanticists versus the Eurasianists. And there's a whole bunch of videos on that people can watch and start learning this. It's all over overland logistical supply routes. Russia knows they're getting squeezed on the maritime land routes. So Russia and China have been spending a lot in integrating their economies. So now, instead of, 5 power center doctrine, John Lewis Gaddis has always said, the key to it, he's the biographer for George Kennan, by the way, who invented the power center strategies of containment. He always said you wanted to separate Russia and China as much as possible. Well, the past 20 years, I don't want to blame it on Bush or Obama, but the trend is because the deep state's running the show either way. There's so much that goes on that is going on without even the presidents knowing. But anyway, this encirclement strategy has made it absolutely essential that Russia and China know that their strategic plans rest on each other. And yes, if in that case, what are the weak links? You got to control the Korean Peninsula. So now, whether they like Kim Jong-un at all doesn't make a difference. They need to support him whether they like him or not. Same thing with Iran, because if the West is trying to break apart Russia into separate oblasts, yes, they needed to go through Iran and Afghanistan. Right. Afghanistan, the nation building project in Afghanistan failed. So that didn't work. I want to make a brief aside that you can put American foreign policy since the late 70s into three different categories. The first one from Zbigniew Brzezinski and Stansfield Turner. Brzezinski wrote The Grand Chessboard and a whole bunch of other books on how to do this, but people should watch, Operation Cyclone. That era is a regime change destabilization period all the way up until the global war on terror after 2001, 9/11. Then the GWAT era is basically a regime change nation building project, which then failed when we left Afghanistan. Now, I get a lot of discussion on that. Some people are saying, yeah, but it turned out to be regime change destabilization the whole time, with the Arab Spring and all of that. Yes, they're right. But I think the intent was they really were hoping that the Middle East would become, democratic to Western standards. But it just didn't work. So by the time Afghanistan fell, they just decided to go back to regime change destabilization, funding the Sunni VEOs to then, sabotage Russian and Chinese oil and natural gas and railroad and ports projects, all infrastructural projects all over Eurasia. I mean, you can just see that. You see that in Pakistan. You see that in Iran with Chabahar Port and Gwadar Port. You see that in Myanmar. You see diplomatic pressure in Thailand that Brian Berletic, focuses on. Going back to Ukraine, yes, Russia knows that it can no longer sell oil and gas or really anything to the West. They have nothing more to talk about. If they apply more sanctions, like the EU was thinking about applying sanctions for aluminum ingots. All right, well, what's the problem with that? Aluminum, the biggest expense in aluminum is energy. It's got more electricity in it than anything else. If they stop the importation of aluminum to Germany, well, the Volkswagen Group and BMW and Porsche and all those, Mercedes, they're all losing money and going bankrupt right now anyway. So now if you take aluminum, one of their other biggest cost factors, if you start to increase the price of that, well, does that make their situation better or worse? It makes it way worse. So then where does that material go? Well, it goes to China. Okay. Does Russia have to sell it for a discount and not make as much money? Okay. But guess what? China's products, again, become more competitive on the global market. When their car companies are becoming so much better and cheaper, that it's not only the German automobile industry that's going out of business, the Japanese automobile makers are also going out of business. So it's a combination of energy, commodity prices, and yes, China has newer factories than what they have in Japan and Germany and the United States. So
All right. Sorry.
Let's go to another one.
All right. So he also says, let's right here. Let me bring it over again onto this screen. There's a few things that are kind of more declarative statements rather than questions.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
All right, here. This is the one that I think. This is the one I think you should address head on right here. On the subject of the Middle East, it isn't connected to the Ukraine. Oh no, that's not the part I wanted to. This part. The Middle East isn't connected to Ukraine. The Middle East has always been a mess. It always will be. It's tribal and controlled by a 7th century cult ideology. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with the Middle East.
No, nobody.
It being a mess. Nothing about that. But this is the part that Turkey controls Europe with Russian natural. Excuse me. That Turkey controls Europe with Russian natural gas is a joke, and that's where he goes on. There are other sources, including the United States. And he talks about how the United States is sent 51 billion cubic meters of liquefied LNG to the EU in 2024.
Right.
So that Turkey, the idea that Turkey has, and that was something that you were talking about yesterday, that Turkey has controls Europe with Russian natural gas. Natural gas is a joke.
Yeah, I can't go. I forget where everything is on this particular slide set because I just add on to it for whatever we're talking about.
Okay, well maybe just give the TLDR on that then.
Yeah, but just no, I want to address this.
Okay.
There's YouTubers out there, and there's obviously there's written sources as well. Let me see if I have one up here on this slide set. I'm just flicking through it real fast. But the energy prices are just going sky high, especially over the winter, to the extent that Norway and Sweden are very angry at Germany. This has been going on for months. That they're having the energy costs have gone up, I don't know, something like 6 or 7 times. Looking at the cost of energy in Norway, where they use a lot of hydroelectric, and of course they got natural gas from the ocean. They're tired of sending their extra energy, through electrical grids. Same thing with Sweden to Germany, because Germany shut down its coal factories, shut down its nuclear plants, as it's also cutting off LNG, and natural gas by pipeline. So the mistake that this guy makes, I don't know his name, it doesn't matter, is
I love Double D. It's a good name.
What's that?
His name is I Love Double D. It's a good name.
Okay. LNG is so much more expensive. It's a sea power coping strategy. It is not a long-term solution. So no, that doesn't make a difference. It can keep them afloat for a few months, but it's been going on 3 years now. And no, the Russian economy is, the German economy is collapsing. It's the whole Volkswagen group. You got KTM in Austria that's going under. Yeah, they made some bad moves, but rising energy costs do not help. So you can argue that there's a whole bunch of automotive articles and YouTube videos out there that are saying, oh yeah, these people have also made, they also haven't updated their factories enough. They have bad labor contracts. The cost of labor in Europe is too high. You can make all of those arguments, but then when you add on the cost of energy at each step is increased. It adds up with each transaction, and taking minerals out of the ground, refining them into, for metals into ingots or alloys or whatever, and then processing that to a car part or a consumer product part. There's so many steps in there, and at every single step, a truck has to drive it someplace, drop it off. It has to drop it off to a factory that is run by electricity, and then it has to be finished. And one person's finished product is another person's raw material. So every transaction that it takes, those extra energy costs all add up at the end to make a product completely, non-economically viable, just not cost competitive. So that's the problem that they face. So it's that marginal cost that just went up after the pipeline contracts of Ukraine ended. So much to the extent, look, the Viktor Orban or Vucic or Robert Fico in Slovakia, or even in Moldova, they wouldn't be complaining so much about the energy costs if LNG could easily replace it. Then if Turkey does close off the straits, Bosphorus and Dardanelles, well then, okay, what does Russia do with all of its mineral and agricultural products? Well, I guess they don't go out that port. So what port do they go out? Well, they either go out Vladivostok, way in on the other side of the Far East, and get to the world, or they go through the Arctic, or they just go to China, or they go to Japan or South Korea. So then what does the United States do with sanctions? Because then the commodities prices are going to go sky high. If the commodities prices go sky high in the United States, well, in everything that's not Russia and China, because it's going to drop there, then again, China's manufacturing becomes even more globally competitive, not less. So then the European and the Japanese companies go out of business faster. So there's a, the reason why I use Pareto optimal models is once, both sides of the equation are going to change. So it's understanding how those change when you move one factor from one side of the equation to the other. That's what predictive modeling is about. So yeah, I'm saying he's got like one side of the equation, but he doesn't have what the other side's counter strategy is, and then how it's going to equal out, or what the ripple effects are that going to be. So that's, he can be right about every single fact, but if you're not trying to balance out the equation, yeah, he's taking it out of context.
One thing that we've got a comment from Vandergruff, and this is something that I understood because I've been to Istanbul. I was actually in Istanbul twice in 2024. I spent about a total of 2.5 months in Turkey, but in mostly 2 months in Istanbul last year.
Yeah.
And he says that the Bosphorus is an international waterway. And yes, it is. It's very interesting. You can see, even when I was there, I didn't realize that Coast Guard vessels do international deployments. I saw American, the Coast Guard ships, they're very different from the naval ships because they have that sort of orange stripe.
Well, they got the racing stripe.
Right. And I saw not a flotilla, but I saw a bunch. I don't know what a bunch of naval vessels would be called. It's not a flotilla because I think you have to have like all manner of boats. But I saw several naval Coast Guard ships going through the Bosphorus. I saw a Spanish aircraft carrier docked right near the Hagia Sophia in Sultan Ahmed there. And so I saw this is an international, as far as I understand, there are treaties that this is an open waterway. The Turks aren't closing it. Sorry?
The Montreux Treaty, yeah.
There you go. So the idea, I think that this is something that wasn't really taken into account, that the Turks can just close that whenever they like. They can't, maybe during a time of
not
war.
According to the treaty, of course. I mean, they could.
Oh yeah, they could. Yes, of course,
they
could. Yeah, I mean, it's not out of the question that they could. But anyway, the point is when I was in Istanbul, and I did spend 2 months in Istanbul last year in 2024. I spent in the spring, I spent about a month, and in the winter, I spent about a month, and then a couple of weeks in other parts of the country. And you do see a lot of very interesting stuff going through there. Just if you're standing on the side, whether you're on the European side or the Asian side, you do see a lot of interesting military hardware going back and forth. Obviously, you see mostly what you see is large sort of, as we were talking about, grain container ships or container ships of whatever kind, LNG, whatnot. But yeah, it's something like that. Okay, well, let's finish this up.
I want to stick on that point, right? That you made about the U.S. Coast Guard ships.
Yeah.
All right. I keep on, because this is a great time to bring that up. I keep on saying this. Geostrategy is about blocking another side's economic transactions. So you're blocking maritime, riverine, and terrestrial land bridge choke points. So yeah, the Navy does blue water operations and they do brown water operations. Obviously the Navy SEALs and SWIC do brown water operations along with the Marines, and the Coast Guard also does them. In the Coast Guard, their SEALs are called, well, I don't think they have it anymore, but it was Deployable Operations Group. They used to actually go to BUDS and get Tridents. They stopped the program because too many people, if they passed, were joining the Navy and leaving the Coast Guard. But anyway, the purpose of that was they're going to the Danube River and the Dniester River and all the other rivers in Ukraine to train all the different armies or navies in all the different Black Sea countries. And Matt Bracken and I talked about this in our videos way back when. It's an ongoing group, and yeah, it's about one thing. We talked about that extensively, especially in my Telegram group. When they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, you're like, okay, well, how is Russia gonna keep its contacts with the Slavic countries along the Danube River? Can they just send them those oil tanker ships through the Danube? Well, then all of a sudden you start to realize why they moved NATO and the EU and NATO so quickly to Romania and Bulgaria. Is to block the Danube River Valley so Russia cannot support its allies with LNG is too expensive, but oil, the cost of shipping that by ship instead of pipeline doesn't really increase that much. So yeah, oil through the Danube or the other rivers is still very much a viable product, or even coal, and they got a ton of coal. So you're shipping those Coast Guard ships are going over there to control every single riverine choke point. And the big one is obviously, the big one's the Danube. The Turks used to always invade Romania and Vienna through the Danube River because you got, that's where the Carpathian Mountains, get bisected by the Danube River. So they have to get on the other side of that. So it's a real big choke point. That's where you have a terrestrial choke point that meets a riverine choke point.
Right. Can we, the last thing, I think the last point or the first point is what I've seen that, basically Putin has completely lost. They've been removed as a viable energy player. They haven't taken Ukraine, all of Ukraine. They are basically now militarily toothless. Basically, has the Russian has Putin have the Russians completely lost?
Oh no! Again, the reason why I talked about the March of 2022, what I wrote on LinkedIn to the retired 4-stars comment, I wouldn't have done it if I knew it was his paper. I really did think it was just a repost. But I'm just saying it's in writing, and my position hasn't changed. All right, that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
No, this needs to be explained, because if you think, it depends on your base assumptions. If you think Russia's after territorial expansion of taking over the Bessarabian Plains or the Polish plains on the north side of the Carpathians, well, then you're going to say, well, Russia's losing because they're not in Poland and they're not in the Bessarabian Plains in Romania. So therefore they lost, right? Well, if that's your metric, well, then okay. But if that's not Putin's objective, then they didn't. If Putin's objective is just to protect his Black Sea fleet and his warm water port in Rostov-on-Don, that would explain why he's moved his contact line. And it really hasn't moved in 3 years. I mean, offline, we've talked about that a bunch of times. In that point of view, as long as the Ukrainians are putting their soldiers underneath Russian artillery, and they're losing at a 7-to-1 ratio, which, you know, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis puts that out. McGregor says that, of course. You know, Scott Ritter says it's 10-to-1, but you know he's Scott Ritter. But let's say it is 6 or 7-to-1. That would explain why Putin was in absolutely no rush to talk to Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And he has not been in a rush to speak to Donald Trump. Otherwise, you know, a friend of a friend wouldn't have contacted me, because I've been writing about it, you know, for a couple months now. And talking about it on Energy Newsbeat. I thought the Kellogg plan was DOA the whole time. I still think it is, because again, that explains why Walsh, Rubio, and Witkoff all of a sudden changed their plans. Now they're dealing with their Russian counterparts in Moscow and Riyadh, and Kellogg is just in Europe, just talking to the European politicians. That's we're explaining why the policy just changed. You know, the assumptions that Ukraine's winning the war and the Russian economy is about to collapse. No, I don't think so. I mean, does everybody know the future? Well, had we done that, yeah, we would have invested a lot more money in Microsoft in 1980 and Apple
and Bitcoin in 2011.
Yeah. So yeah, right. And then dumped it in 2017. So no, you know, I'm not claiming to have a crystal ball. What I'm asking people to do is balance out their assumptions, because most of these people are just told, you know, one side of the narrative. I use my sea power versus land power to say, okay, the sea power is doing this strategy, the Rimland strategy. And once you know that, then all of a sudden you start to see, wait a second, all these proxy wars that are going all along the Middle East and Eurasia, yeah, they're different kinds of conflicts, but they're not by accident. You know, they're too coordinated to be by accident, because, and this needs to be explained, China's Silk Road initiative is to access Caspian Sea oil in the Central Asian stands. Their Belt and Road initiative is to take those pipeline, railroad, and highway logistical supply routes and extend them into the Indian Ocean or the Persian Gulf, or even into Chokepoints in Myanmar. They have a big oil and gas field off that port. Do you have Google Maps up there?
I do.
Yeah, you can ship down to Myanmar. You've been there several times.
I've been there several times. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there once. Yeah, go down to Chokepoints on the coast where that bump is in between Bangladesh and Yangon. Yeah, go up a little bit. Yeah, there you go. Up a little bit more. Okay, there's an oil and gas field off the coast of there. So China built, you know, they built their oil and gas platforms. Then they built a pipeline from there all the way up to Kunming in Yunnan province, going through Mandalay along the old Burma Road. All right. Yeah. If you pan out a little bit and go towards Kunming, I got maps of that somewhere on that slide set, but I can't find them. I mean, it's going to take me too long to find it. But yeah, so Kunming's up in lower Yunnan province. Yeah, there you go. So the pipeline goes up there. The point is that that they built that is, yeah, it's transporting natural gas by anything other than pipeline is just too expensive. So they built a pipeline up there. They built an oil pipeline So why did they go to that expense? Because a bunch of people have debated whether shipping oil, isn't cheaper. So why wouldn't they just build a natural gas pipeline? Why build both? And then the answer to that is they want to make sure that if the Straits of Malacca are shut down by U.S. naval power, then they want to be able to offload the oil and send it by pipeline, from the closest port from the Middle East or Africa over an overland logistical supply route. So Russia and China have been gearing up for this with their various overland logistical supply routes, that if they're cut off, then they're going to close ranks and support themselves. I went over with Working Brother the Russian strategic plan for Autarky. So, the different economic development theorists have started to talk about, well, if you have a war in another country, or you're attacked, or you have a financial crisis that occurs in a trading partner country, you need the ability to withstand a shock. So every country has to have some degree of autarky, kind of like an emergency response plan for, well, these things came about where they were talked about during the Great Depression era a lot. Charles Kindleberger had a great multidisciplinary or multi-subfield explanation for the cause of the Great Depression. So that's kind of been used as a model for how to counter certain shocks, because a lot of people compare that against Milton Friedman's, monetarist, where he focuses on just money supply, but actually Kindleberger's, when you're trying to prepare for shocks, well, naval blockades is one of those shocks. So that's the shock that Russia and China have been preparing for. So no, I think there's much farther along with that type of emergency response preparedness. Well, clearly than the Wolfowitz plan anticipated. Because I think that the powers that be in the financial services really thought that the Russian economy was going to completely collapse within a short time. No, it hasn't. My take on, you can go back to Ukraine now. There's a lot more to be said about China's strategic plans in Southeast Asia with their 9-dash line, but I don't want to get into that. That's not the focus of this discussion. But if he keeps the line of contact just around the Azov Sea area, where it hasn't moved in years, then why is he doing that? Well, he's feeding the Western delusion that Ukraine is winning the war. As long as they're doing that and feed more soldiers in there, well, why should he change positions? His strategy is working, if that's your base assumption. So again, I get that from Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis. He is a military expert. McGregor's been saying that the whole time. There's a host of others. If that's false, well then, the Kellogg assumption was Ukraine is winning, or it's about even, it's a stalemate. So that assumption was, well, then Putin should be hurried to getting to the table to negotiate. Well, he's not. Based on my assumptions that the Russian economy is not disintegrating, it's got a good kind of inflation because it's demand pull, not cost push or monetary, because it has stopped its capital outflows to the City of London and Wall Street due to the sanctions. So now that money is staying inside of Russia. So now it's developing faster, which is it's overheating. So I think the Russian economy is much stronger, and it can't grow fast enough. Why can't it grow fast enough? they can't replicate the Western joint ventures that left, but slowly and surely they are. But if Japanese and German automobile manufacturers start to actually go under, which it looks like they are, well, then they can just do a bulk sale, get their engineers and their equipment, and start really filling those gaps at a much higher pace. Somebody brought up, why the Russians did their visa program to attract Westerners. Yeah, it's to get top level talent. So again, it's another way that the Wolfowitz plan can backfire. Excuse me.
Right.
You want to go to another one of his lines? Yeah, just go down each one of his sentences. Because
I think that was pretty much that was it. That was the gist of it. I think that the last one that you answered, that was the core of it. Yeah.
I think it's an excellent question because, I think it's one-sided, but he needs to hear what the other side is. And then, it's not going to be the other side because I'm saying it. It's going to be how this plays out in the next 6 months. And I wouldn't have posted these papers all over Energy Newsbeat if I wasn't, pretty sure that this is the way it's going to work out.
All right, so that's basically it. So, Mr. I Love Double D, there is your, I guess, response to your questions.
And that grand strategies chart. Oh no, that's a great chart. There's a whole different level of training. Door kickers in the tier 1 and tier 2 units do not get the same type of training as an analyst in the Pentagon. The functions are totally. They wouldn't have 9J section functions if everybody had the same training. Right. No, every MOS is radically different. So to have people only trained at the tactical and operational level, that's basically what Trump's problem is. He doesn't know it, but he knows it now. And not having anybody at the grand strategic level, no, that's a big mistake. It's being corrected. But that actually resides in the big finance and big oil companies, as far as I can tell.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Also today, do you have time? Can we get in the chat? Do you have time to do Q&A like we did yesterday?
Oh yeah, if you want to do that
let's ask the chat. Chat, would you like us to open up the stream to anyone who'd like to join and ask a question? So just opening up the proverbial internet phone lines, and you can call in or dial in or URL in to ask George or myself a question on what we've been talking about today. One, if you'd like to see that, not right now, probably within the next 25 minutes or so, or two, it's not really necessary. So 1, yes, 2, no, 3, just to be facetious. All right, George. Let's get on to the PSYOP. The name of this one, the PSYOP industrial complex.
All right, that's good.
Okay.
Now let me get back to this. I had to.
Let's see.
I've just been adding on to this. Actually, to know how that government works, that 4-level slide set. That's on slide 25.
25. Okay.
Yeah, that's actually very critical.
Okay.
So
right. This is the one that he was bringing up yesterday. Let me just.
The fact that guy says that it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, hold on a sec. Window. All right, there we are.
Because when you look at, I love the Sean Ryan show. I used to watch it all the time. I don't have time lately because there's other, pressing matters I got to deal with. But yeah, just about every one of his guests on there, including Tulsi Gabbard, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, you know, a bunch of people I really like. Oh, he's got Sarah Adams on there that talks about the different Sunni VEOs also. Yeah, they're all at the tactical and operational level. They're trying to guess what the people at the grand strategic level are doing. Just it doesn't matter who's on that show because they always go back to, you know, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. What was that about? It was really botched. Yeah, it was. There's parts of it that's botched for sure. It was way worse than they thought. Yeah, I was there. But on the other hand, for me, it instantaneously, and I was blogging about that on LinkedIn at the time. So again, my statements are in writing. My viewpoints have not changed. They were going back to Zbigniew Brzezinski and Stanfield Turner's regime change destabilization program because they finally just gave up on the regime change nation building program. It just failed. Mm. So then, they pivoted to another part of Eurasia and the strategies of containment. And to learn the strategies of containment, I'll say it again, you know, Mr. Sin has advanced placement high school class, you know, like a little 20-minute video on Mackinder and Spikeman. That's a great 100 level introduction to the sea power versus land power strategies. And the strategy stuff has really great videos on it. Real Life Lore's got, he has to put that spin on it of Russia attacked for no reason. Okay, forget about that. Watch his videos on the catastrophic energy problem of Russia where they can't export anything because they have a seaport in St. Petersburg, which is blocked in the Baltics. We've gone over this 1,000 times. The other ones in the Black Sea where it's contained. The other ones in Vladivostok, which is contained by the Japanese archipelago that you are now sitting in. So all their ports are blocked. They've always known that. So they've had to really aggressively pursue an overland logistical supply route with China.
Let's show people what you mean by being hemmed in. And this could actually go very much for China as well, being hemmed in by an umbrella or an encirclement by the United States. But if you have, for example, here in Vladivostok, you can see this, right, George?
No.
No.
Yeah, I still see the strategy bridges. Yeah, and the strategy bridge, you know, the charts I post are from major military and law enforcement training organizations. So, I mean, I'm not making up the chart. This is what they teach in their training classes.
Right. I mean, so this is something that, you know.
If it wasn't valid, why'd they do it?
Let me just go through what you were talking about, how the encirclement of Russia and their ports being blocked. And I'm gonna put this up here. Share.
Oh, somebody just put in Kaliningrad. No, I didn't forget about it. It's Latvia and Lithuania stop the railroad transit back and forth. So that's cut off by a terrestrial choke point.
Yeah, hold on. Let me bring it over. Right here.
Yeah.
Can you see?
So once you cut, and again, this is just a good way to go over it. Like, okay, they have the seaport, but it's still blocked in on the Denmark Malmo Strait, whatever you call that.
Right here.
Yeah, between Copenhagen and Malmo.
Yeah.
So it's still blocked in there. But the main point is they were using, going from Moscow to Kaliningrad, via rail, but they stopped it. So now they're supporting that by ship from St. Petersburg.
There we go. You get it. Can you see it? This is a pretty good estimation right here. You've got St. Petersburg. Kaliningrad is an exclave right here. I believe the this was Königsberg. This is how
Correct.
far Germany used to go. If anyone's interested, I mean, it's incredible how much land that they lost after the Second World War.
Yeah, East Prussia.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kant was from East Prussia, along with with Paul Tillich, the famous theologian. So, and I think Nietzsche was from East Prussia, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, there's really, famous people from East Prussia. It was a very big trading port during the Hanseatic League. So yeah, they lost a lot of territory.
Yeah, they did. And Kaliningrad is, as you guys can see, it's an exclave. It's kind of like Alaska to the United States. You have to drive through Canada to get to it. You'd have to go through Poland or Lithuania, as you can see. It doesn't have a land bridge to the motherland or the mother country. So as George was explaining, up here in St. Petersburg, what they're having to do is come through here. So Kaliningrad it doesn't have a land bridge to the home country. Yeah. And they still can be. So if you take a look at here, this is sort of the choke points in the Baltics to get to the North Sea. You've got this one right here. I think this is the main one. And you could go around, I guess, this way as well. So this is the other choke point. There's 2 choke points.
Right.
From the Baltic out to the North Sea.
And when you go, because like all I'm saying is the general area of St. Petersburg, you're trapped in the strait between Copenhagen and Malmo. And in the Azov Sea, okay, yeah, it's not just Rostov-on-Don. There's some smaller ports, and boat docks and stuff. Okay, there's a whole bunch of them, but you're still trapped in by the Kerch Strait. Then you got the Dardanelles Strait, the Bosphorus Strait and the Dardanelles, and then you're still trapped by the Suez Canal, and then you're trapped by the Strait of Gibraltar. We've gone over that since March of 2022 when I first started.
Well, this brings up, and it's completely a tangent, and we'll get back on to where we need to be in a minute. But have you heard of the plan by Israel to, as we all know, like we have right here, we have the Suez Canal. It from the Red Sea out to the Mediterranean. Everyone, but have you heard of the plan that the state of Israel is talking about building its own canal to bypass this right here?
And, I'm looking to see whether I got a map of that, because you have it's the Ben Gurion Canal is what.
Yeah, the Ben Gurion Canal.
From Aqaba. Well, no, it's Eilat. I think is the on the.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right
on
here.
On the Israeli side.
Yes.
It's Aqaba and the Jordan side, but on Eilat on the Israeli side, it goes through the valley. It tries to go through the lowest points, of course.
Yeah.
Through the desert.
Yeah.
And then exit. The plans that I've seen that are drawn up go around Gaza. So everyone's saying, well, no, actually it's easier to go straight through Gaza, which is why they did that. I don't know. The action that they're taking in Gaza is kind of extreme. I don't think it's that. I think it's a combination of I gotta understate things a little bit here. I usually
I completely understand.
Yeah.
Completely understand. I do the same. But all right, let's get back on track. The global PSYOP industrial complex.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's I gotta switch screens here a little bit. Yeah, this just came up. I'll do a formal paper in a week or two, because I got a whole bunch of things stacked in front of it.
Right.
But somebody just wanted me to comment on something that was thrown up on LinkedIn. So I took the guy's name off of it for his protection. But basically, he posted something up, and of course, the pro-Ukrainian people got upset about it. But a friend of mine wanted me to comment on it, that he's been following me ever since April, I want to say May or June of 2021, because I was writing about, Biden was talking about, I got to put this in context. I'm sorry. Biden discussed the pullout of Afghanistan in April of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And so about a month later, I started talking about why I thought the Afghan army was going to fall apart on ethnic, religious, and linguistic lines. And it did. Yeah, I caught a lot of flack on that for the first 30 days. But guess what? As June, as early to mid-June, okay, by the time mid-June rolled around, I didn't have any more critics. And then July, people were like, well, how long? Somebody asked me on LinkedIn, how long did you think it was before Afghanistan was going to collapse? They said, September, October, November, and it was the end. It was the end of July, and I distinctly wrote about 2 weeks, and then on the 16th we were out of there. So, I gained a lot of people that were. One guy, there's more than a few people that in the OSINT community said to start following me because I'm usually about 3 months ahead of schedule. So no, I'm not. If in this case, I think I'm 3 to 6 months ahead of time on everything. So yes, I am anticipating a very huge cognitive dissonance from a lot of different people over the next 6 months, the next 12 months. I'm just telling people to prepare for dramatic change. Because yes, the Trump administration has my longer slide sets. And yes, they've already gone through the yelling and screaming stage. And yes, their foreign policy has already changed. So they changed course. I'm pretty sure this is accurate, but the next point is, yes, if Putin can weather the storm by focusing on internal development in Central Eurasia better than the German automobile manufacturers or the Japanese automobile manufacturers. That's basically what the bet comes down to.
Right. And
then we talked about last night because somebody was confused, and quite rightly so. If you don't study this stuff full time, it's going to be very confusing. But I broke it down to Trump's Western Hemisphere policy is based on tracking the age-old twin deficits of the current account trade imbalances and the accumulated national debt. So once you put it in those two terms, then you can see he's focusing on not becoming the Weimar Republic. Because when you look at the tunnel vision thinkers that are just looking at the war, the contact line in Ukraine, well, the bet is if you go down to, I'm kind of going off schedule here, but it's okay. Yeah, go down to slide 11.
11, okay.
It's the yellow one.
Right, yeah, I got it.
Okay. Yeah, see if you can bring that up.
Okay. Where are we now? Window. I think I've somehow. Oh, there it is. Slides 11. Sorry, just all of these things. I wish we had the tech support, but we don't. Let me get this looking a little larger. All right, here we go.
Well, that's the other thing. No, we absolutely do not get any funding. And yes, the government has all of my overseas contacts. They know every single hotel that I've spent in, for the past 15 years overseas.
How's that, George? Is this
that's fine. Okay. What's on the left side is Paul Wolfowitz, defense planning guidance, fiscal year 1994 to 1999. Yeah, that's the Wolfowitz strategy to thwart any near-peer powers from emerging. So that was Bush 41 was so angry at this, I'll just use, for lack of a better term, supposedly he kicked it back to Wolfowitz with a note attached that tell the crazies to go back to the basements of the Pentagon and stay there. Mm-hmm. And then he had this, okay, the president can declassify any document that he wants. So yes, down at the bottom it says secret, no foreign. Well, it's crossed out. So yeah, Bush 41 declassified it and released it to the New York Times. You can still download that. Okay. So why am I telling people that? I am urging people to double check my sources. Okay. That will clarify a lot of ambiguities. Okay, now if you pull back out a little bit and you go to the overextending and unbalancing Russia on the right, yeah, that's a 12-page synopsis of how to strangle the Russian economy and create proxy wars in every single country around Eurasia. So that's written in 2019. And then the 359 page or 354 page extending Russia is right to the is in the middle.
The middle one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that's highly explanatory. Brian Berletic on his channel has been going over these documents for the past 3 years. And then he also talks about how USAID and NED and the rest of the NGOs are backing the color revolutions, the protests, and things like that. You also have the really super discreet clandestine entities working with different, they're violent extremist organizations in different areas to blow up Russian and Chinese pipelines. The latest one is in the Chin district of Myanmar up north. Well, Chin, and the other one is I'm gonna.
You keep going. There seems to be somebody at my door. I'll just be back in 1 sec. You keep going.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so the other area is in northern Myanmar. So they just happen to keep on blowing up wherever wherever the MI6 and the OSS were in World War II. So those kind of relationships between these groups and U.S. discrete organizations, it maintains over decades. Yeah, I would like to change slides, but I can't. I can do it on mine now. So yeah, until Felix can get back, I can just read from from my own other monitor. But what this person was posted on LinkedIn was, he says, the world is starting to realize that Ukraine was a massive PSYOP and money laundering operation, which means that Putin was kind of right about the whole Ukraine thing. This is why the deep state conditioned the world to believe everything Russia says is disinformation. They knew that Putin knew their schemes, so they weaponized nearly all media around the globe via Soros's USAID influence machine. You can throw NED and some other ones in there to make the public believe anything Russia says is a lie. In reality, it's all about to cover up their own lies and criminality in Ukraine. This is why the MSN has been screeching about Russian collusion and Russian disinformation since around 2014. The deep state knew that Putin knew, so they weaponized the media against him the same way they did Trump. You just lived through the most advanced information propaganda war in human history. The people you have been taught to hate are actually the good guys, and the people that you've been taught to worship are actually the most evil people on the planet. Okay, that's coming from somebody's LinkedIn page. I'll just leave the names out because somebody just wanted me to comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you can go to, I just read slide 2.
Okay, slide
Go
2.
to slide 3 because
Okay.
I wanted to get the quote direct.
Yep.
Yeah, let me go off script here and just explain how I came about this, because let me grab some of my books as props here. I was, in university, I was assigned, well, a whole bunch of books in international relations, but, I just want to go over one, and that's John Lewis Gaddis' Strategies of Containment. He teaches both at Yale University and at Naval War College. I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves me correctly, it was actually Stansfield Turner that moved him from teaching at some small university in Ohio to the Naval War College, and then moved him over to Yale University to start teaching the grand strategies again, because Spikeman died in the late 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no one really to take over the program, and he was already doing it. And then, and then Kennan was an ambassador, of course. But yeah, he's basically been running along that with Professor Hill, and then Paul Kennedy has been up at Harvard, but he goes down to the Yale Grand Strategies and also teaches there. So those are kind of like the big 3 academicians, and a lot of my professors went to the Ivy League schools. So that's how I came about this, way back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I've been following that ever since. And then I also, because I'm from the New York area, used to listen to Professor Stephen Cohen, the Russian, he's one of the premier Russian experts. He used to speak every Monday night on the John Batchelor show on WABC in New York. So I've been listening to him for, a long time, especially during the Obama administration, because he would come on every night and basically just, he would always start off by saying, I don't know, who Obama is getting his advice of dealing with Russia and Eastern Europe from. Because he says, I know all the Russian experts, we all go to the same conferences, and I asked them, none of them were included in the Obama administration. He would talk about that all the time. He'd always, and then go into whatever issue was going on in Ukraine. Well, Poland and Ukraine. So he's been doing that since, 2009, 2010. So he's been talking about that for a very, very long time. And I watched a lot of his shows. Not everyone, but a lot of them, most of them. So for me, having a background of the 5 power center strategies, because we did videos on that. I did more detailed videos on the Working Brother show. Yeah, everything that once you know that, everything that they're doing in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe and in Southeast Asia is about strangling the Russian economy, Heartland versus Rimland strategy in Spikeman terms, but in 5 power center doctrines, how to encircle it and contain it. So then, I can say, well, okay, well, the administration is putting out media rhetoric because, they're trying to prevent Russia from having an export-led growth strategy. If you're trying to block their trade, you're trying to block them from exporting raw materials so they can use the profit of that and reinvest it. One of the ways that we went over last night was, yes, they put oligarchs in charge and they exported a lot of the profits to the city of London So actually, with the sanctions, it stopped that. Actually, there's more capital flows staying in Russia. So it actually improved. And, again, I held up this book by Wilbur and Jameson of the different political and economic development theory strategies during the mid 20th centuries. Yes, they have become, instead of fixing the problem, they use it as an owner's manual, just like Orwell's 1984. So I'm going into that with that information during global war on terror, and then I'm tracking. I wrote papers on it at work on overland logistical supply routes since at least all of 2012. Well, in 2013 too. And then I just keep it up on my own. So I've been doing this for a long time. So yeah, somebody wanted me to comment on that, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gonzalo Lira called it the Empire of Lies. I'll use his SAT word, Empire of Mendacity. I've been listening to a guy named Paul T. Carter, who's a retired 82nd Airborne guy. He lives up in Chiang Mai, and he has a show, Carter on Politics or Carter on, I forget what the name of the channel is, but he's a Vietnam War, French Indochina buff. So he does a lot of videos on what happened right after World War I in Laos. The secret war in Laos. He does a lot of good videos on that. But lately he's had another gentleman's name that was retired Marine Corps guy, very interesting, he did several tours in I Corps, up north where the Marines were in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So, Route 9 from Da Nang to Khe Sanh, because then that goes to Don Sam Van in Laos, and then over to Savannakhet and Mukdahan in Laos and Thailand. So you start. Okay. Anyway, he does a lot of videos. He did a few videos on as he went as a doing kill capture missions, or the what do you call them, the search and destroy missions with the Marines, and he got very good at it. Survived a lot of ambushes and ambushed a lot of people. A lot of really, well, boy, that's real combat, right? So he moved back to Thailand and really started looking at the war from different set of eyes after, as he was getting older. So he said, yeah, the whole thing about, we're winning the war, and yeah, Vietnam all fell apart. Well, same thing with Afghanistan. And guess what? Three's a charm. Same thing with Ukraine.
Oh yeah, Ukraine is winning. Ukraine is winning. And if you don't say it's winning, you're a Putin shill, and you're getting money from the Kremlin. How many rubles did you make with that post?
Right. So we're in the same situation again. So I understand why that guy wrote the long piece and thought I was wrong about everything. Okay, well, great. Let's just have a peaceful conversation about this, because I think three's a charm. Okay, I want to go into Mearsheimer a little bit before I explain what I wrote in my response for this, because a buddy of mine got his degrees at Texas A&M. He was prior U.S. Army, and he did a lot of cool stuff in Baghdad. A lot of stuff in Sadr City, things like that. Very interesting guy. But he left the military and used his GI Bill and got his BA and MA in international relations. And yeah, he turned me on to Mearsheimer way back in end of 2014. So I've been reading him ever since. What Mearsheimer's, and this has direct bearing on the conversation. I know we're way off script here, but it's the mindset that I'm going in, with the situation, because that was back in 2014. So Mearsheimer's main deal in Tragedy of Great Power politics, one of his points is during the 20th century, fascism and the Axis powers failed because, yeah, too aggressive foreign policy, too militaristic, everybody ganged up on him and destroyed him. Okay, so that's one problem. But then he starts talking about, well, communism failed too. Because everywhere you had communism, and Jordan Peterson's been talking about this for years too. Wherever you have communism, it fails. So in Russia, you had under the Lenin and Stalin eras, you had the big Russian famine in the 20s. Then you had the Holodomor in the early 30s. The Mao's 5-year plans, his great leap forward in the 1950s. Killed tens of millions of people in starvation, or maybe 100 million. I mean, the problem is you can lose that many Chinese and not notice, unfortunately. But yeah, who knows how many people died in that? And they had no success. They had when they collectivized the rice farms in Vietnam, especially in northern Vietnam. Yeah, that was a complete catastrophe. But in Vietnam, they very quickly abandoned it and went back to private ownership. So it wasn't the big debacle that it was during the Pol Pot era of Cambodia. And I first went to Cambodia in 2015, and I was like, well, what's this place going to be like? And I remember going from Rantha Prathet to Siem Reap, and I'm looking at the cab, and I'm like, the taxi as on the way there. I think you've been that route before. Going to
yeah,
or what? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you've been there. It looks just like Central Florida. So you have great soil, a year-round growing season, and with the big lake there, you have abundant rainfall and a big, huge lake. So you got plenty of water for irrigation. So my first impression of just taking that 2-hour drive or 2.5-hour drive, whatever it was, was only communism could create mass starvation under absolutely ideal conditions. And the reason of that, of course, just to keep it real simple, is what Jagdish Bhagwati said. He wrote a 2002 book entitled In Defense of Globalism. He's an Indian guy that was teaching at Columbia University. But he was saying the reason why communism failed is really simple, in his Indian experience, is whatever, it doesn't matter what Marx's, predictions of how great the utopia was going to be. The reality of it is the bureaucrats make everything easier for the people behind the counter, and which makes it next to impossible for the people in front of the counter. So he's making the discussion that capitalism does the reverse. If you don't make things easier for the people in front of the counter, you're going to be out of business. So you have to be, price competitive, price performance competitive, right? Otherwise, you're out of business. So that's, just to keep it real simple. Yeah, communism is a horrible system, doesn't work in reality. All of Marx's predictions about human nature are completely false. You go back to Hume Smith, right? So I go into this with, and the reason why I'm discussing this is you have the big three ideology, the 20th century was the big age of ideological experimentation. So fascism failed because it created nothing but enemies and then got crushed. And then communism failed because it just didn't work. Marx and Engels' assumptions of human nature were way wrong. So then it comes down to Francis Fukuyama's book of Liberal Democracy 1. Well, Mearsheimer's skeptical of that because he just thinks that's going to be the major last ideology that fails. All right. And I think so too, because what I've been writing about was because Tillich and Fromm and Carl Rogers and Maslow were up in northern. Well, they're up in Manhattan. Frome was actually down in the New School down by Washington Square Park. But the other three were in Columbia or Union Theological. Carl Rogers actually started at Union Theological before he studied psychology over at Columbia. So they're all right next to each other, but they're all there during the same time frame, trying to get the nexus between Freudian psychology and ideology. So yeah, my work on that model is it needs to be, they got the right stuff, but they didn't know how to mate it to the macro theory. So I related it to Aristotle's 6 forms of government. And then it's really easy to put the pieces together, right? So why am I explaining that? Because you're divorcing religion from the liberal democratic ideologies. So without Christianity, then the question becomes, does Christianity and capitalism go together? The correlation that Max Weber made, or does society fall apart, or is it a null hypothesis? It doesn't matter. So then you're talking about, well, is there a change between Christian morality being pervasive across culture? Tillich's big book is the effect of Christianity on society. I'm sorry, it's religion and culture. So it's the effect of religion on culture is what he's talking about. So the experiment since then is, will the United States uphold as an ideology under materialism? Well, okay, you're going to have a very loose causality here because there's a lot of intervening factors, but controlling just for that one single variable in that time frame, the more materialistic people got on Wall Street, the more they exported our jobs overseas. So now, do we have a strong economy to take on Putin? Well, no. Okay, we don't.
Well, just to point that out is I've been reading that China, and it's talking about embargoing some very sparse rare earth minerals, and I think also tungsten, where it's going to be in such a position to be able to stop U.S. defense manufacturers from building their weapons of war. So China has now been put into the supply lines, into the supply chain of the American military industrial complex. I mean, right. One of these, it was Trotsky or Lenin or Marx or one of them, who said that the capitalist was going to sell you the noose to hang him with. And it almost seems like the United States outsourced the noose to hang itself with, at least militarily. And you're right, especially as well, the offshoring of all the jobs and the hollowing out of the economy,
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, somebody threw in there. Yeah, Weber was Protestant work ethic, and then R.H. Taney was religion and the rise of capitalism. Just to throw those two sources in there. Read those books a long time ago. So that's been the basic experiment. So if this fails, what Mearsheimer is talking about is, we rise and fall. You did your video several years ago on John Glubb, or someone else brought up the fourth turning. People describe, the cyclical theories, rise and falls of great powers in different ways, but the correlations that I make is on the breakout period, using Glubb's terms, you have a strong elite mass relationship, and then that carries over from the spring to the summer, and then during the fall, when a great power starts to overextend itself, then the elites start aligning with the other elites against their masses. And then society collapses. So I make the correlation between the cyclical theories of culture and John Mearsheimer's rise and fall and great powers. The false promise of liberal hegemony. He does a whole bunch of videos on that. So I think we're the third ideology to fall. So again, you're going back to Nietzsche's Twilight of Idols, because he was doing 1,000-year cycles or major cycles, and the other rise and fall and great powers. Nietzsche was trying to do 1,000-year cycles, and then Spengler has his 5 cultures that rose and fell over somewhat of those cycles. And then you got the smaller power theories that people like J.D. Unwin did, or Paul Kennedy, Rise and Fall of Great Powers, or Mearsheimer, Great Tragedy of Great Power Politics. You got Glubb, and then The Fourth Turning. So you have a complete set of books that are actually very, very parallel. So actually, since cultures usually collapse, that's historically true. I'm basing my assumptions on that. Very, rarely do they ever reemerge. Again, I go back to my 7P plan papers, which I need to put them back up on the Energy Newsbeat website. I need to kind of reformat them a little bit and get them ready for Stuart to upload so people can see what that transition from a Christian-based culture to a materialist culture based on the writings of Rousseau and Marx and Engels, but put in a monetary, in a free market, well, not a free market system. It's really, it's a perverted form of market economy. It's no longer capitalism.
Mm.
It's existing in the perverted form. What Tawney and Weber are talking about is Christianity and capitalism being a proper form, while a crony market economy is a corrupt form. Again, I'm using Aristotle's proper and perverted form dichotomy, and I'm putting economic theory into a virtuous versus vicious form to match that, and a constructive versus destructive psychological theories, because when you do that, they all line up, and you can do very, very strong pattern matching recognition frameworks, which is what I'm using. That's why I'm pretty sure of what my of my analysis on this.
Okay.
But I know that's a very long aside. Any questions?
Yeah, that's we've got a few questions because we've got about, I'd like to wrap it up in about 15 minutes. We've got our first, just so you guys know, I'm going to put it back into the chat. It should be pinned on YouTube. I think I pinned it on Rumble. Let me just check Rumble. I'm going to put it back into Rumble again. Let's see. Okay. Paste. Rumble's showing some ads. I have no idea how that's working out. Rumble's showing ads midstream as I went over to Rumble. This is the link over on Rumble, guys. If you're watching on Rumble, I believe it's on D Live. We've got it on YouTube, and we have it on X. So if you'd like to join the conversation with a comment or question, you're more than welcome to do so. The only caveat being, please keep the profanity. Please just don't use profanity. And if you do troll, you'll just be ejected immediately. We had quite a number of people the last time, and I believe Sal was here. Sal's back. He was here yesterday, and I think I'm going to bring him in right now. Sal, and also, by the way, if you do want to join, just make sure your microphone is working. We had several people yesterday who did join, and then the microphone just wasn't working on, I would say, at least a good quarter of the people didn't have a microphone plugged in or plugged in incorrectly. So we'll bring in Sal as our first guest commenter questionnaire. All right, Sal, can
Hi,
you hear
Felix.
us?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Great.
Hey, Felix. Hey, George. Hey, after our call yesterday, I went to your website, George, and just read as much as I could before I had to go to sleep. I'm not feeling well, but I did as much as I could. And you base your work basically explained my question from yesterday, the grand strategy, the Brits, and it's been talked about by Tom Luongo, one of the other guys I was watching today.
Yeah. Okay.
Basically, what's going on? Where even I saw a different comment. I had not seen it from Secretary of State Rubio, where basically Secretary of State Rubio said that NATO was a control on America, and that's kind of harking to what Tom Luongo was saying about America being led by, where it appears like we are the power but we're really not. We are implementing the grand strategy to isolate Russia on behalf of the British, which I've always considered the British our allies, but I don't think anyone on here likes another country being involved in their internal affairs. I certainly, as an American, do not want to be involved in other people's internal affairs. And I'm hoping that America sticks to Fortress America, or President Trump sticks to Fortress America, and peaceful, cooperation where we can, but ready to go to war if we can't. So, but I was very, very enlightened by your articles there on your website, sir.
I got just a ton of articles I need to get off my computer and post up someplace. I'm also going to be putting them up on the Raven Geostrategic website, and I'm not going to post my slide sets up there because they're highly proprietary. The government's got some of them, so like everything else.
What are your thoughts on his statement there, or his comment on the U.S. not being the power in NATO, but actually being used by the British as
Well, okay, yeah. Well, again, go back to the grand strategies slide. How are the British controlling it? The grand strategists are in the financial world. So you're talking about, well, Alan Dulles. I mean, the Dulles brothers were at Cromwell and Sullivan during the 20s and 30s, and then during World War II, went into the OSS in City of London and burned Switzerland. So you get the connection between Wall Street, City of London, and Switzerland, where the big banking centers are. Then the Dulles brothers go back, and Alan Dulles becomes the longest running person, DCI, Director of Central Intelligence, when the OSS switches to the CIA. And then John Foster Dulles becomes Secretary of State. So you have both overt and covert operations done by, two brothers who are also the children of U.S. diplomats. So when you're talking about right there, you got the connections between, big finance being the grand strategist and then running the different institutional levels. And those institutional levels, the military's got its branches and levels of those things according to their MOSs. Same thing with the intelligence community, same thing with the executive branch law enforcement agencies, and the same thing with the executive branch civilian agencies, especially the ones dealing with interior and commerce and energy. I have a very long slide set on that. We're not going to, well, I got tons of slide sets that need to be pushed out because my risk assessment for me personally just precipitously dropped since the change of administrations, and Pam Bondi is in office, and Kash Patel, and now Dan Bongino is deputy director of the FBI. So
wait a minute, Dan Bongino, the bald Fox News host?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
Hold on. I love a lot of these people.
I don't know much about him. I just knew that he was a Fox News host. I don't know anything about him.
He was Secret Service, guys. Yeah, he was Secret Service.
Okay.
Yeah, he's pretty experienced. He led teams. He worked under the Obama administration. So
okay.
He's pretty solid there.
Okay. I was just under the impression it's similar to President Trump's 27-year-old new press secretary who's married to a 65-year-old dude.
I thought he was only 50. Anyway, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't. That. Unfortunately, that's not my problem.
No, me neither. Go ahead.
Yeah. But anyway, No, yeah, Dan Bongino is a former PLETSI instructor for the Secret Service. He's very good at what he does. At that level, he'll be very good at his job. He knows who they need to get rid of. He knows because he's been in contact with all the different whistleblowers, and yeah, they know who to weed out. So I love his domestic policy. Foreign policy, he's part of the PSYOP. Okay, we're not going to be able to finish this slide set today. We're going to have to come back to it whenever Felix has time. It's a very, very big subject. There's no way you're going to do it in one stream. So now that my situation's changed, that I don't have to worry about being George Papadopoulos or Roger Stoned or Carter Paged or Seth Riched. I would like to put out a lot more of these slide sets because, that guy's questions are very, very good. I got zero problem with it because the degree of this psychological operation of just putting out one-sided news, a lot of people are going to go into very, very, very severe cognitive dissonance over the next 6 months, that nothing that they've heard the past 20 years or 30 years is true. I went back and I got a very long slide set that talks about how the the OSS with Jim Thompson, Felix, you know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
In Bangkok, went there in 1945 with Pat Pong of the Surrey Thai, because that's the old original CIA office, or OSS CIA office is in the Pat Pong district, which is now one of the biggest.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say it.
I've been there once, and no, that's too much for me. Okay.
At Pat Pong, that area is also famous for, let's just say, ping pong balls.
Yeah, we're not even going to go there.
We're
just going to move.
Right. We're not even going to
right on past that. Right on past that. And yeah. All right.
All right. Anyway, sorry about that.
Go there once and stay away from there after that. So anyway, you really get to see how once the Culinary Institute of America shows up with DOD and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they just start massively bringing in the roads, well, they're using the civilian agencies, Department of Agriculture, Department of Interior, they didn't have Department of Transportation back then, but, they start building all these highways and roads. Well, they start to bring in, Department of Agriculture starts to bring in the agricultural and mechanical universities to start developing their different agricultural industries in connection with the big agricultural companies. So, that hits. Then you get the mining companies, and then the oil companies are pretty much out in the Gulf of Thailand and in the different areas of Southeast Asia with the geographical survey departments, looking for where oil and gas might be. So once these agencies show up, it's just, the Fortune 500 companies just descend on a place. So then they started building these airports to support the Lao fighting Ho Chi Minh. And then you start to see, with the increase of escalation and of the war in Vietnam after the French Indochina War hits, then you get to see the military side come into it. So when you go back to that grand strategic chart, you really, by the Southeast Asian study, you see how big finance and big oil, working with, it was Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles. You also have the Brown Brothers Harriman, Avril Harriman of New York was also involved in that. So they work in these big Wall Street companies. They do the strategic planning. They get the different levels of government, what they call, the institutional levels, just to descend on a place. And yeah, they use the trading block strategies to contain, the maritime, riverine, and terrestrial choke points, especially when you start to talk about Vietnam and the El Paso plan of trying to cut off the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Okay, I'm sorry, LBJ didn't want that El Paso plan met, so the Ho Chi Minh Trail was never shut down. But at least you get to start to see how these strategies work in coordination between, big finance, big oil, and the different government agencies on those institutional levels. So that's something that's, it takes a long time to really understand that. Now I don't have to worry about being lawfared so much. I would like to put those slide sets out into general media. I don't have a video producer, so it's too much for one person to do. But yeah, if I get funding, I'll do that, because we'll have to finish up this slide set another time.
Yeah, absolutely.
The amount that people have been totally deceived over the past 2 decades is mind-boggling. No, it's not going to happen in just, I don't know, how often do we do a live stream? Once every couple of months?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and people are not going to get this subject matter without a systematic understanding of it. So yeah, I keep on telling people, watch the Mr. Sin videos on Speakman and McKinder, watch the strategy stuff videos, I think that's the name of it, on Mahan, but watch as many videos as he can. He has a lot of superfluous videos on India for this conversation. Wow, boy, actually they're really good case studies. I just don't want to, unfortunately I got to give people homework assignments, because otherwise, without a background in this, people are going to be lost. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
That's why I spend most of my time on Energy Newsbeat, because I'm already talking to MBAs and engineers that have been, a couple of decades in the energy business. So they know 2/3 of the information. I got to give them the other 1/3. That's not a bridge too far.
Okay. Thanks, Sal, for being with us. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to, let's see. So any last comments or questions, Sal?
No, that's it. I'm good. I'll be diving into your work, George. But the big question that I had was answered by it. It just, again, like I said, I just didn't understand the suicidal tendencies of the entire liberal Democrat body, both in the United States and in Europe, on this mission to destroy themselves against Russia, when it just makes sense for Russia to be economically integrated into Europe without having forever wars. But understanding that Russia is not supposed to, by the people who want things to continue the way they are, is not supposed to integrate, and they rather have multiple wars. I think, George, you mentioned all the all the areas around Russia where they have proxy wars. And that's exactly what most people in MAGA do not want. We do not want to send our kids over there, and we're just tired of that. So your discussion there in your papers really explained that. So I thank you, and I'll sign off. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
The other thing about the proxy wars, I don't think any president even controls them. I mean, I just think they're done by rogue entities, out of certain locations for the U.S. government. And I don't think, and they're operating on black budgets. Again, Eyes Wide Open channel does a really great expose. It's a young guy. He does a great expose on the linkage between opium sales in the Golden Triangle and black operations around the world. So that's, I binge watched those videos, in I think it was November, because it explains, where Paul Carter's videos on the secret war in Laos were really good. I was always wondering, like, how did the OSS make contact with the Hmong? How did they make contact with, Mac B. Sog make contact with the Montagnards? I was always really confused about that. And then I come to find out, yeah, it's the old British opium trade in China. And so then when you start to dig, well, these people have already dug into history. So I just had to sit back and watch the show. They cite their sources of information, and including the Corsicans operating out of Vietnam, which then, led itself to the French Connection, like the movie. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is very fascinating. Once you get into the different, I was already talking about Sullivan Cromwell and Brown Brothers Harriman. I think someone threw in the chat. Yeah, that became KBR. Yeah, I mean, the legacy of these organizations, continues, of these founding fathers, of the connection between big finance and the intelligence community, which originally grew out of the basement of the Pentagon. So you draw these connections, and yes, they're still going on. And it was Ben Rhodes always called it the blob, and even Obama couldn't control it. So it's not one president. I always tell people to watch the old General Wesley Clark videos, because he knows some of the people involved, and he knows, obviously, from being in the Pentagon, he knows way more than me about that. And he calls it a foreign policy coup, but he doesn't know really how it happens. It's very, you're talking about connections. We don't know exactly who's meeting with whom. You got a pretty good idea, but you don't know exactly. So I think this is going to follow, just like Vietnam, just like Afghanistan. Ukraine has been fought under totally wrong pretenses. I already talked about Stephen Cohen. People can watch Oliver Stone, Ukraine on Fire. Okay, it's Oliver Stone, but his videos on that are really good. John Mearsheimer, Professor Mearsheimer's been talking about it. Jeffrey Sachs. There are others. I can't remember all the names, because I did get some books where I just kind of looked at them real quick. But yeah, those are the main ones. So we're going to have to get into this, finish this, the rest of we're going to have to go and
I think we could get a more regular time setup now that I'm sort of semi-stationary in one place.
Yeah.
So
you were traveling. I really wanted to get this out in January ahead of the schedule, because I knew the Kellogg plan was DOA. Now they know it. They changed policies, but now how do you overcome and tell people everything that they've heard for 2 decades is basically not true, but yet these outliers are actually right? See, that's the problem Trump is going to have. Europe is going to collapse. Their European economies. Oh, our friend, what's her name? Carolina?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, she's probably in the chat. But she was talking about, Europeans hate Trump. Okay, it doesn't matter. That's not going to, hating Trump is not going to save Volkswagen and BASF. It's not going to save the Russian automobile industries from collapsing. Hating Trump isn't going to do that. So, Trump just thought he could get an end to the war and still stay friends. Oh, no, I don't think that's possible. Just my opinion. It's written in highly detailed language in my series of papers of why I don't think that's the case. But I'm going ahead and making my predictive bets now that my lawfare risk has severely gone
reduced
down.
itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Sal, so thanks for being here. Hopefully we'll get you in next time. George, any parting words? I think we've gone over 2 hours. So I should say to the audience, first of all, I want to thank you. On all platforms, we're over 1,000 people, so that's pretty good for a Monday night or Monday, I think, for most people. So it's pretty good. I'd like to say thanks for George for being here. And George and I will have a much more regular schedule on this because I am not on the road anymore. It makes it a lot easier having a stationary place to do these live streams from, rather than from hotel rooms or, from places like Pat Pong, where George hides out with his ping pong balls.
Yeah.
But yeah, George, I will say I'm going to try to put George's links on these videos, but he's been very obstinate in sending them to me, and he figures, well, if they're not going to give me a job, there's no reason if I should or I shouldn't.
There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of
okay. I'm just teasing you, George. I'm just teasing you. I do want to say
don't
thanks.
Get me in trouble now.
I'm not.
I'm already in enough trouble.
I'm trying not to.
One thing I do want to go over, if you go down, just so people understand what it is I'm talking about, go down to slide 17.
Okay.
People need to physically see this.
Okay, one sec.
I'll give you 2.
Yeah. Okay. You're going to have to. Let's see. Here we go. There we go.
All right. So this is the number of attacks that Stu Turley gets basically every day since September, after I started reposting on his site.
Mm.
He got his verbiage is not in this off the bottom, but when he uploaded my Russian natural gas series of papers, oh boy, did he get attacked. And like I said, back in September, Google blocked access to his website after I posted a bunch of after I went over a whole bunch of slide sets and papers.
Mm-hmm.
He was, you couldn't access his website from Google inside the United States. You could access it from other ones, but not Google. Mm. Then during the election cycle, when he started to catch up on my backlog of videos, because we're still recording with videos, but then he got such a bad malware attack, he was down for 2 weeks and had to buy all new servers. All right. He comes back. He's got another backlog of my videos, posts those up, but now he's gotten with the cybersecurity guys, and they put a whole bunch of more layers in that firewall and did a whole bunch of other stuff. He used to work for Intel. So so he did another batch, and a lot of these things are coming from Northern Virginia. Mm-hmm. Well, they originate then, and then as the day cycles, they shift around the world to where, if you see the big, huge office parks that are in India, we have all the Silicon Valley companies are all over India, and they all moved to Kiev in about 2004, 2005. I've mentioned that on a whole bunch of different shows about how all the communications in Kiev, whether it's mobile phone or ISPs, they're all going through American switches, all going through American filters and through American big server farms. So that's where all the IP addresses of the attacks are coming from.
Right.
Because Felix, you've been all over India.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Strangely enough,
what I'm talking about.
Strangely enough, and to my regret, for certain, I think long-term viewers will know my regret for going to India. All right, so I should first of all apologize to Pablo and Namor, the Submariner, who are in the queue to join. We're actually just finishing now. Please join George and I in the next one, which should be quite the next stream that we do together. It should be quite soon because we have been going almost 2.25 now. So,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. We've been going quite a while. So I apologize to Pablo, apologize to Namor, the Submariner. Please just try to get into the next one that we do. It would be, you're more than welcome to do. And with that, I want to say bye to everybody. It's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to have George with us. And any last words, George?
No, other than I just threw that up there because if you're spouting the narrative, you get boosted.
Mm.
And you get USAID money, you get NED money, you get boosted in the algorithms.
It's the same on
then,
YouTube. If you're a
yeah.
bread tuber boost, doing the same thing with the narratives. I mean, we've even had a few people in the chat today saying that Google has done their job well at basically burying my channels. It's it's quite interesting too. Like with Twitter, until Elon Musk bought Twitter, I got to a certain, and then I just would lose subscribers on Twitter endlessly. Elon Musk buys it, and within, I think, about 3 months, I doubled my subscriber count. So yeah, these things are real. With that said, just want to say thanks to everyone who's been here and everyone who helped the stream with super chats and rumble rants and lemons. That's very much appreciated. It does help these things happen because it is quite a lot of time and a lot of work to do. And with George, I want to say thanks. If you'd like to follow George, I'm going to try and get his stuff up on the replay. We shall see. If not, we'll do it the next time, George. So everybody, thanks very much for being here, and we will see you in the next stream. Bye for now. It's a new year, and in 2020, I'd like to draw your attention to some designs over on my shop. It helps the channel very much, and with a wide variety of designs, I'm pretty sure you'll find something that you will like. Link to find them is in the description, and a very hearty thank you in advance.